Summer, 1943. Europe is on fire. The deserts of North Africa shimmer under a cruel sun, and the war has turned against Italy. Dust hangs in the air as columns of weary Italian soldiers lay down their rifles. Their uniforms are torn, their faces hollow. They are no longer an army, just men trying to stay alive. British trucks roll in, engines rumbling across the sand. Orders are shouted in 2 languages. A young private from Naples glances at the horizon one last time. He doesn't know where they're taking him, only that he won't see home for a very long time. On the journey north, the sea smells of oil and salt. The ships carry thousands of prisoners. Inside the holds, the air is thick and silent. Someone hums a hymn. Another whispers, "Maybe they'll treat us better than our own officers did." Nobody answers. Days later, a new kind of cold greets them, the damp gray of Britain. Rain falls on barbed wire and muddy boots. The men step onto the docks, blinking through the fog. One of them murmurs, "So this is the enemy's island." Trains take them inland, clattering through quiet countryside. Villages pass by like scenes from another world. Stone cottages, church towers, fields bright with green. Behind the fences of their new camps, the Italians smell the earth after rain. It's foreign, but alive. In those early days, the locals keep their distance. Children are told not to go near the wire. Farmers watch from the hedgerows, uncertain what to think. These men had fought for Mussolini after all. Yet they don't look dangerous. They look tired and young. Food is simple: bread, soup, sometimes a little meat. Nights are long. The guards pace with lanterns, their shadows stretching across the huts. Somewhere an Italian voice sings softly, a song of home, drifting over wet fields. By late autumn, the war in Italy is collapsing. News filters through. Mussolini has fallen. The men don't cheer. They just stare into the rain, wondering what comes next. One morning, a British officer walks through Camp 60 with a clipboard. He studies the prisoners at roll call: carpenters, farmers, stonemasons, ordinary men caught in extraordinary times. A farmer nearby asks the officer, "Can they work? My harvest is rotting in the field." The officer hesitates, then nods. "Under guard? Yes. We'll see what they can do." And so, the first group marches out, shovels and hoes in hand, guarded but hopeful. The ground is soft, the sky low and gray. They begin to dig. And in that quiet act, beneath the endless British rain, the story of enemies becoming neighbors begins. Fog hangs over the English countryside like a pale curtain. The train rattles through fields lined with stone walls and hedgerows. Inside the carriage, Italian prisoners sit shoulder to shoulder, their breath steaming the windows. None of them speak much. Every sound, the clack of wheels, the hiss of steam, feels louder in the silence of uncertainty. When the train finally stops, the doors slide open to gray skies and cold wind. A soldier shouts, "All right, off you go." Boots hit the platform. The men step into a world of wet grass, distant bells, and the strange, sharp smell of coal smoke. One prisoner murmurs, "It's so green here, like another planet." Trucks wait by the tracks, engines idling. They drive through winding lanes toward a fenced field with rows of wooden huts. A sign reads, "Camp 60, Orkney Detachment." The gate creaks open. Guards motion them inside. Wire fences circle the camp like an iron web. Beyond the fence, sheep graze peacefully, unaware of the war that brought strangers to their hills. That night, the men sit on bunks made of rough planks. The wind whistles through the cracks. Someone pulls a blanket tight around his shoulders and whispers, "Listen, you can hear the sea." Outside, waves crash against the distant cliffs. a sound both haunting and familiar. At dawn, the guards unlock the gates. A group of prisoners is marched to nearby farmland. The path is muddy, the tools heavy. British farmers watch from a distance, arms crossed, faces unreadable. One woman whispers to her husband, "They don't look like soldiers." He nods, "No, just boys." Work begins in silence. Shovels strike the earth. The rhythm of labor replaces the noise of battle. A guard lights a cigarette, watching as the Italians dig ditches, repair fences, and pull stones from the soil. By noon, sweat and mud blur the lines between prisoner and worker. When a farmer's horse slips in the rain, one of the Italians rushes forward to help without waiting for permission. The guard almost yells, then stops himself. The farmer nods once, quietly, "Grazie." The prisoner smiles, "Prego." Small exchanges like that start to happen more often. A loaf of bread shared, a tin of tea passed through the wire. The farmers learn names, Giovanni, Paolo, Luca, and the men learn to say thank you and good morning. At night, the camp feels less like a cage. Laughter rises from one hut. Someone strums a broken guitar. Guards don't stop it. They listen. One murmurs, "Sounds almost peaceful." And you can almost see it, the thin line where fear gives way to familiarity. The British countryside no longer seems so strange, and the men behind the wire no longer seem like enemies. In the middle of the dark, a young Italian looks up at the stars and says softly, "If this is prison, then it's kinder than the war." No one answers, but the silence feels warm. The transformation has begun, quietly, like the first seed beneath the soil. Autumn fades into winter. Frost covers the fields, and the days grow short. Inside the camps, the Italians talk quietly about home, about mothers, olive trees, and the taste of wine they will not see again for years. Then, one cold morning, news spreads through the huts like a spark. Italy has signed an armistice. Mussolini is gone. The war, at least for them, has changed shape. The men gather around the camp notice board, reading the words pinned there by the British officer. Italian prisoners may volunteer for cooperator status. They don't know what it means yet, but the sound of it, cooperator, feels different, lighter. A few days later, the gates open not for labor duty, but for something new. The officer stands before the prisoners. His voice carries across the yard. "You are no longer our enemies," he says. "If you choose to work, you'll do so freely. No guards, no guns. You'll wear this badge, red, white, and green, to show who you are." He holds up a small patch of cloth. For a moment, no one moves. Then a hand rises. Another follows. Within a week, hundreds sign their names. The change is immediate. The barbed wire still stands, but the fear begins to fade. The men walk through the gate carrying tools, not under orders, but out of purpose. On a foggy morning, a farmer waits by his field. When the Italians arrive, he gestures toward a broken gate. "Can you fix it?" he asks. Giovanni nods. "Yes, we can." Hours pass. They work side by side, speaking a mix of English and gestures. The farmer's wife brings them tea in chipped mugs. She hesitates before handing one to Giovanni. Their eyes meet, a brief, uncertain truce. By evening, the gate stands straight again. The farmer inspects it, grunts his approval, then mutters, "Good job." Giovanni smiles. "Good job," he repeats, his accent thick but proud. Soon, the cooperators spread across the countryside. They mend fences, drain flooded meadows, clear old canals. In return, they receive extra bread, letters from home, a sense of being useful again. At one farm, an elderly woman brings out a basket of apples. "Take some," she says softly. A young Italian bows his head, whispering, "Grazie." She answers, You're welcome. The war rages elsewhere, but here, in the rhythm of shovels and rain, another kind of peace grows. At night, the men sit by the stove in their huts. Someone hums a tune, another taps along with a spoon. Outside, frost glitters on the fences. A guard walking past pauses to listen. He doesn't call out. He just smiles into the cold and walks on. You can almost feel it, the quiet shift, the unseen line crossing from prisoner to worker, from stranger to neighbor. And in that small, ordinary change, something extraordinary is beginning to take root. Far to the north, the wind never stops blowing. On the Orkney Islands, the sea crashes against black cliffs, and gulls scream above the gray waves. Here, a group of Italian prisoners lives and works, building something massive, a chain of causeways called the Churchill Barriers. Their job is to lay concrete day after day, sealing off the channels that enemy submarines once slipped through. It's hard, freezing work. The men's faces are red from the wind, their hands rough and cracked. Yet, when the day's labor ends, a few of them stay behind. They don't head to their huts. Instead, they stand before two half-buried Nissen huts, long, curved shells of metal left over from old storage sheds. One of them, Domenico Chiocchetti from Moena, looks at the empty space and says, "We can make this into something beautiful." His friends laugh at first. "Out of junk?" one asks. "Out of faith," Domenico answers quietly. They begin to work after hours, using whatever scraps they can find, bits of wood, broken tiles, tin cans, old fencing wire. By lantern light, they bend and hammer metal, shaping it into candlesticks and lamp frames. Others mix cement with sand and paint it to look like marble. Domenico paints saints on the curved walls, his fingers steady even in the cold. A guard stops by one night, puzzled. "What are you building here?" Domenico looks up, brush in hand. "A chapel. For us, and maybe for you too." The guard tilts his head, then smiles a little. "Carry on." Weeks pass. The gray walls transform under their hands. The ceiling blooms with blue skies and golden stars. A Madonna looks down from the altar, her eyes calm and kind. The men hang a small cross they carved from driftwood. They call it La Cappella Italiana, the Italian chapel. One Sunday morning, the prisoners gather inside for the first time. There are no pews, no priest, just voices singing softly, filling the metal shell with warmth. Outside, the wind howls, but inside, the sound feels like sunlight. A British sergeant walking past stops at the doorway. He removes his cap and listens. The music carries over the camp, fragile, human, unafraid. When you see it now, you might not believe it was built in a prison. But in that moment, under the northern sky, it was more than a building. It was a promise that even in war, men could still create instead of destroy. The chapel stands there still, a testament carved not by soldiers, but by hands that chose hope over hate. Morning light spills over the English countryside, soft and golden. The war has ended, but its footprints remain. Empty camps, rusting fences, a few huts left standing in the fields. Yet if you walk through these places now, you can still feel something in the air, like an echo. In one small village in Somerset, an old farmer leans on his gate. He points to the field beyond and says, "That's where the Italians worked. Good lads, hard workers. One of them taught me how to plant tomatoes the right way." He laughs quietly, the memory warming his voice. The camera drifts through other towns, Oxfordshire, Fife, Orkney. The same stories repeat, whispered by those who remember. Old letters, yellow with age, lie in family drawers. A woman unfolds one carefully. The ink has faded, but the words still breathe. "We worked together like brothers. They called me Signora Anne." In another home, a man shows a photograph. Two young men grinning beside a tractor, one in a British jacket, the other in a patched Italian shirt. "That's Dad and Giovanni," he says. "Giovanni came back after the war, married my aunt, never went home." Some of the Italians did return to their villages after 1945. Others stayed, building new lives, raising children with English names and Italian songs. You can hear their voices in the pubs, the churches, the markets. Up in Orkney, the Italian chapel still stands, glowing against the sea wind. Tourists push open its small wooden door and step inside. The air smells faintly of wax and salt. On the altar, fresh flowers rest beside a note, "Grazie for the peace you built here." One of the caretakers wipes dust from a window and says softly, "They built it with nothing, only heart." And maybe that's why the place feels alive, not like a monument, but like a heartbeat that never stopped. The paint has cracked, the plaster has faded, but the spirit inside has not aged a day. If you close your eyes, you might still hear it, the clang of tools, the hum of Italian voices blending with the wind, the quiet laughter of men who no longer feared one another. In every furrow of those old fields, in every village where they once worked, something invisible was planted, not just crops, but kindness. And though the seasons have turned, that kindness still grows, just as it did when strangers first learned to call each other friends. The war is over now, but its silence lingers. Fields once filled with soldiers are green again, and the sound of tractors replaces the thunder of guns. Yet, in those quiet corners of Britain where Italian hands once worked the soil, the memory of what happened never fully fades. In a small village hall, a history group gathers. The walls are lined with black and white photos, farmers, POWs, smiling together beside hay carts. An elderly man points at one picture. "That's me," he says, tapping the frame. "And that's Carlo. We built that bridge in '44. He taught me how to whistle Italian songs." The others chuckle softly, but his eyes grow distant. "We were supposed to hate each other. We never did." Outside, the rain begins to fall. It patters gently on the windows, a rhythm the land knows by heart. A teacher walks a class of school children past an old POW campsite. Only a small plaque remains, half hidden in the grass. She tells them, "These men came here as enemies, but they helped feed our grandparents." One child raises a hand. "Did they get to go home?" The teacher smiles. "Some did, some stayed, but all of them left something behind, something better than war." You can almost feel it, can't you? The shift, from fear to trust, from hate to work, from war to simple decency. It didn't happen in speeches or treaties. It happened in muddy fields, over cups of tea, between men who barely spoke the same language. A historian later calls them the first peace builders of modern Europe. Maybe that's true. Before governments signed peace, these farmers and prisoners had already found it, plowing side by side. In the archives of the Imperial War Museum, a letter sits folded in a box. It's written by a British farmer to one of the POWs, years later. "You came here with nothing but your hands. You left us with more than you know." The voice of the narrator softens, almost like a whisper. Sometimes, peace doesn't begin when the war ends. Sometimes, it begins when two people decide not to hate. And maybe that's the real story buried beneath the soil of Britain, not of conquest or surrender, but of compassion quietly taking root. The Italians had come as captives, but when they left, they carried something far greater than freedom. They carried proof that even in the darkest winters, humanity can still bloom. The sky over Orkney is bright and cold. Waves crash against the rocks below, just as they did 80 years ago. But the wind that once carried the sound of hammers and shouted orders now carries something softer. The laughter of visitors walking toward a small white chapel standing alone in the field. Inside, the air feels still, like a breath held in time. Sunlight filters through colored glass and spills over painted walls. Angels, stars, and a calm Madonna watching from above. Every line, every brushstroke still whispers of the men who built it. A young guide speaks to a small group of tourists. This place, she says, was made from scrap metal and hope. Built by Italian prisoners during the war. They had nothing, no tools, no freedom, just faith and skill. An older woman in the group wipes her eyes. "It's beautiful," she says softly. "You can almost feel them here." In the corner stands a framed photograph of Domenico Chiocchetti, the artist who led the work. His daughter once returned here as an old woman. She stood in this very room and said, "My father painted this so people would remember kindness." Outside, the wind tugs at the grass. Beyond the chapel, you can see the Churchill barriers stretching across the sea, the very causeways those same men helped build. Now cars pass over them every day, never knowing they drive across the labor of former enemies. Across Britain, small traces of that time remain. In one village, a church displays a wooden crucifix carved by a POW. In another, the mayor lays flowers each year at a plaque that reads, "Built by the hands of Italian prisoners, remembered by friends." You might not notice these things unless someone points them out. A fence repaired long ago, a field still called the Italian Patch. But they're there, silent reminders that compassion can outlast conflict. On a warm summer day, a group of schoolchildren visit the chapel. They sit on the wooden benches, wide-eyed, listening to their teacher. She asks, "What do you think this place means?" A little boy raises his hand. "It means they didn't stop being good people even when the world was bad." The teacher nods. "Yes," she says, "exactly that." Outside, the waves roll on. Inside, the chapel glows with late sunlight. A small miracle born from war, still standing strong. And as you watch the visitors leave, one by one, you realize the truth. The story of those men didn't end with their freedom. It lives here, in every stone, every brushstroke, and every act of quiet kindness that followed. Dawn rises over the Orkney Islands. The fields shimmer with morning mist, and the sea glows silver beneath the first light. The chapel stands alone, quiet and small, its white walls soft against the horizon. Inside, a single candle burns. Its flame flickers, steady but gentle, like a heartbeat that refuses to fade. A caretaker unlocks the door and steps inside. He sweeps the floor, straightens the flowers, and pauses for a moment at the altar. His hand brushes the old wooden cross carved by men who were once prisoners. "Still holding together," he whispers, smiling. Outside, the wind hums through the grass. Far away, a tractor moves across the land, the same kind of work those men once did, plowing the same soil. The air smells of salt and earth, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear them, the laughter, the hammering, the songs in two languages. Later in the day, visitors arrive, families, travelers, maybe someone like you. They walk the narrow path up to the chapel, reading the sign at the gate, built by Italian prisoners of war, 1943 to 45. Inside, the light catches on painted stars. Children whisper, afraid to speak too loudly, as if their voices might disturb the past. One man stands before the altar and says quietly, "They came here as enemies, but they built this as friends." His words hang in the air, as soft as prayer. When they leave, the door closes with a gentle click. The candle still brands. Outside, the wind carries a mix of sounds: the sea, the gulls, the echo of footsteps fading down the hill. You can see it now, how a story planted in pain grew into something peaceful. How strangers, forced together by war, found a way to build beauty instead of bitterness. And if you walk away from that chapel, if you look once more at the endless sky and the green fields below, you'll understand what they left behind. Not just a building, not just a memory, but a lesson written in the soil. That peace is not made by governments alone. It's made by hands, the same hands that once built fences, now building bridges. The sun climbs higher, the chapel glows, and in the quiet between the waves, the world seems to whisper back. From enemies to neighbors, from war to work, from survival to shared humanity. These are the seeds they left for us, and they are still growing.